this week, there are only 4 more weeks. Now, I will just take a moment to, some of you know the drill, some of you don't. You know, my classes go 16 weeks a semester, 32 weeks a year. And for whatever reason, they choose to only do 30 here. So at the end of the school, and usually there's only 1 left over, but because I was sick, now there's 2 left over. Anyway, so at the end of the year, it will kind of stop, but the videos will be available to you if you want to finish out the year. We're going to be in the middle of reading The Eagle of the Ninth, which is unfortunate. I don't mind. I would extend an invitation. I have a class on Wednesday afternoons that starts at 1:30 in Moline. So like if you came on a Wednesday morning, you can't hang out. Do you know what I mean? Because I have to leave. But I will be in touch with your parents about that. I would be glad to offer a couple of extra classes out there. But if you can't, they will be on, or your parents can just say, you know what, you're done. We're not going to do the last 2 weeks, and that's up to them. But anyway, so if you're looking through the guide and you say, wait a minute, there's more weeks in the guide than we have left. That's why, because my classes go 32 weeks. Okay, so I just collected your papers. I want to do a little bit of review because, okay, we haven't been together in 2 weeks, and then the week before that we missed. And you may have read your Dorothy Mills reading a while ago now, maybe a little foggy, but please open up your reading questions on page 51. And let's just have a little talk and do a little backtracking. The first talk I want to talk about is, are you with me, Jesse? Let me see how I want to phrase this question. What is there about a republic the way Rome was after they threw out their kings? All right, let's review what I mean by that. Republic means what? You tell me, what is a republic? Yes. Well, if you're a democracy, you vote on everything. It does, but what do all the people get to do? They get to vote for their leaders. Yes, and then your leaders make laws for you. We don't vote on every single law. Every time the government wants to pass a law, we don't all go out to vote. But our leaders do. We vote for our leaders. So, Rome set up a republic with instead of 1 president for 4 years, 2 consuls for how many years? 1 year. Well, hold on to that idea. Because Dorothy Mills told us something. All right. Hang on, let me read it. More than 400 years before, Rome, the small city-state, had driven out her kings and had established the rule of the people in their stead. Now Rome, the chief city of a dominion that extended north and east and west of the Mediterranean, finding the old city-state government incapable of ruling such a vast territory and not knowing what to put in its place, through strife and bloodshed and violence, had gone back to the rule of 1 man. Okay, I'm going to stop here and think about this for a little bit. Remember, when Rome threw out her kings and became a republic, all she owned, all she was in charge of, was the little tiny area around Rome. That was it. And during those years of the Republic, we've seen them take over all of Italy and Sicily and take out Carthage and Carthage's holdings, and then Greece and parts of Syria. What is there about their form of government that would make controlling a large area more difficult? Why do you think Dorothy Mills says that? Yes. That is very concisely said. People don't want to be ruled by other people that are making rules for themselves. Well, what's the deal? All those people in Rome get to vote for consuls. Why don't I get to vote? We saw this already. If you remember 2 weeks ago, Marius and Sulla fought when all the Latin allies revolted. They said, what's up? We want to vote. Why don't you treat us like equals? And Rome said, no, we will not treat you like equals. And it ended up in a war. People want to be ruled by, how can I say this? We want to think our rulers know us and know what's important to us. Does that make sense? And so I'm sorry, Matthias, what were you going to say? Say that again. Well, this is true. Yeah. I feel like maybe, you mean today or back then, Matthias? Okay. Because the plebeians were kind of rebelling all the time? Yeah. I think they wanted to be ruled maybe by someone who understood them or felt what they felt. And that's why they loved the tribunes so much, because they thought, we finally got somebody who understands us. People want to think their rulers understand them. And if I live in Greece or Syria and my rulers are all the way in Rome, remember, they can't just pick up the phone and call or text. It's going to take a long time. I think, I might be wrong, several weeks of travel generally by sea. You're not going to be able to get information to your capital. So I want to bring this closer to home for us. Do you guys know? You probably know enough American history to know this, but after the Revolutionary War, we did not have the Constitution right away. Do you know about this? We had something called the Articles of Confederation. We had this for over a decade. And the idea was that the 13 states would just sort of be like a club, We're just all joined together. It's a confederation. But we don't really want to have a strong government over all of them because we don't want people to tell us what to do. King George was telling us what to do. We don't like that anymore. So they said, we'll just have this confederation and we'll all agree, like honor system, to work together. And then, but they did have a representative body over all the states because they had to coordinate things. And we owed a lot of money to France and Spain. They helped us beat England. We owe them money. And so this confederation government would say, would you please tax your citizens, states, to give us some money? No, we don't think we want to do that, said the states. And the government had no way to force them. Okay, so this went on for a decade, and it was crashing and burning. And they sent delegates to a convention to fix it. And what the delegates at the convention secretly did is wrote the Constitution. They weren't really supposed to do that, but that's what they did. And they was just like, hush, hush, don't tell anybody we're writing a new Constitution. And which is the Constitution we have today. And you guys know how our government works. We have a strong central federal government in Washington, D.C. Not everybody liked the idea of this. The leaders in the states said, wait a minute, I think the states are just going to disappear. The federal government's going to absorb everything. Patrick Henry was one of these worried people that give me liberty or give me death, Patrick Henry. He said, I don't like this Constitution at all. So they had to do some advertising to get people to accept the Constitution. And so Alexander Hamilton, some of you may know, and James Madison did some PR work. They wrote a bunch of letters and they printed these specifically in newspapers in New York, and we call them the Federalist Papers. And they were just advertising, basically. It's like, why is the Constitution great? And one of the big problems that Hamilton and Madison talked about, he said, the opponents of the Constitution say a large area cannot be ruled by a republic. Why would people say that? Rome was their shining example. It was a republic, and when it got big, it had a lot of trouble. Because people want to think that their representatives, that their government knows them. So the opposers of the Constitution were saying things like, those people in Washington, D.C., they won't know what my problem is over here in, and it wasn't even very far west, like Western Pennsylvania, the Ohio River Valley. That was far west. And Hamilton and Madison said, you know, if we balance the powers and we give them the right to elect representatives in each state, and so the system that we have came into being. But they knew it was a problem. When you get huge and you have an elective systems, the people on the fringes say, you're not listening to me. You know, isn't that part of the reason we rebelled from England? We were on the fringes, right? You're taxing us. You're not listening to us. We don't have representatives in Parliament. People are saying the same thing with Rome. These things happen over and over again. So Rome has a problem. They don't have a system of government that's really capable of dealing with such vast amounts of space and people. But this is an important thing I read, what I just read to you. Let me find it. Finding the old city-state government incapable of ruling such a vast territory and not knowing what to put in its place. Madison and Adams and Hamilton, they knew what to put in its place, right? They had a plan. Rome doesn't have a plan. Does that make sense to you guys? It's just happening to them. Oh, now we run Greece. Now we run Syria. Now we have, Spain. Oh, when did this happen? It startled them, and they didn't understand something's going to have to change. So either a group of people sits down, like they did at the Constitutional Convention, and plans something, or things happen to you. And things are happening to Rome. And for about 70 years, things just happened to Rome. And we started talking about that last time. Marius came in, great, fought against Jugurtha and the Numidians, and fought against those Gaulish tribes and the Germans. Remember, they're building fences out of people's bones and fertilizing fields with the dead bodies. But he changed some things. Do you remember, this was 2 weeks ago, do you remember what he did with the army? Well, you go ahead and tell me what you were going to say. Okay, so let's talk about that first. That's huge. He ended up being consul 6 times total. Remember, you were supposed to wait 10 years before you got to be consul again. You have to live a long time to be consul 6 times total, at that rate. No, there was 5 times, and then he went on the run because Sulla came, and then he came back and he got one more shot, but he died. He didn't live that year. He died a few months later. You could be if you started young. But which would be hard because usually you worked your way up to consul. Are we okay there? Oh, junior high is so fun. It makes me feel alive and less stupid when I drop things too. Okay. So Marius ended up being ruler over and over again. Why? Because the people loved him. He was good at what he did. And I think we talked about this way back when we talked about Rome becoming a republic. What would it be like to change your rulers every year? What if we had a new president every year? We elected everybody new every year. Can you imagine? You would never have a consistent policy on anything. At least you give them 4 years and you can kind of step back and look. Okay, what has happened? What have your policies led to? We give it a chance. A year is barely enough time. And so I think, when at that point people were happy with the way things were going, Marius is good. Let's just do it again. We need some continuity here. I think people were realizing that. Yeah, Rhett. Oh, you mean over who's going to be consul?
Yeah.
I think, Rhett, there was a lot of bribing.
I mean, with people
Oh, not that I know of, but I don't know. That's a really good question. If there were tremendous factions going at it. That's a good point. That would be a bummer. I don't want to watch those commercials every year. So that's one thing that was changing. Now back to my question before. What did Marius do different with the army? Do you remember? Do you remember that? He created a paid army, what we call a standing army. And who did that army love? Him. Him. Because what kind of people would he sign up for his army? Anybody. You don't have to have property. You have to have land, home, I don't care. Before, we assume that people who are landowners and homeowners will fight better. They have something they're fighting for. They're protecting something back home. We don't want the riffraff. Marius said, bring me the riffraff. Bring me your tired and poor. I see on the Statue of Liberty, bring me your riffraff. It's not what it says precisely, but that's the idea. Marius said, I will sign up anyone. These people who were maybe homeless, jobless, they had been displaced. Remember we talked about farms falling fallow. I think somebody here was a terrible, farmer. Oh yes, that's right, poor Matthias. And they were in the city, and Marius says, I'll give you a job, I'll pay you, it'll be awesome, it'll be glorious. And so they love him. So, and remember, they're a force to be reckoned with too when you're voting for consul. So they keep electing him over and over, and you have this army that loves him. But you know what? In life, when you're on the top of the heap, you're number one, and time passes, there's always somebody else coming up behind you wanting to take your spot. That's a nasty fact of life, but it is true. This is why we can't, being rich and famous and number one can't be our goal, because you won't be that for very long. It's a terrible goal. It's fun while it lasts, perhaps, but it's not going to last. And so Marius was number one, but remember, here comes Sulla. Sulla, who, if you recall, helped capture that King Jugurtha that we talked about in Africa, and then never let anybody forget it. I captured Jugurtha. He reminded everyone, much to Marius's disgust. And they worked together a little, but in the reading we talked about last week, there was some arguing about who was going to be in charge in the east, fighting against the Parthians. And Sulla got sick and tired of it, and he turned around and came back to Rome, and just Marius ran. Sulla was now number one. And that's kind of where we left it off. And so what I want you to see today, what I want to talk about is that Rome is changing. And it's not like anyone woke up one day and found out everything was different. It happened over decades. And I'm not sure at the time anybody understood why it was changing. We, with hindsight, can look back and say, you had such a big area to manage. And, once you conquer people, they don't always just stay conquered. They rebel, and you have to send more armies. And they had to do this now, and they needed strong leadership. We also talked about something else. I think we talked about this when we talked about different systems of government. What can one person in charge do that having several people in charge can't do? What's good about it? Make decisions really fast. If I'm the queen, I say it and it's done. But if I have a group of people or two consuls that have to deal with the Senate, it takes a long time. And sometimes you need quick decisions. Maybe something happened in Asia Minor and I don't find out about it for 2 weeks in Rome. I better do something fast, because at this point, the situation's been going on for a while. I need someone who can make decisions fast. And people who have been generals in the field, think about it. You're in charge of a group of guys, and it's life or death. You got to make decisions fast, right? You're used to it. So these powerful generals were just what Rome needed. It's just unfortunate that some of them weren't very nice. What did you want to say, Rhett?
So Marius was kind of six times.
Yes.
Who was the other?
One of them was Cinna. Or he was with Sulla. I don't remember. That tells you a lot about Marius. It was almost irrelevant who, but there was Marius left, and one of them was named Cinna, Cinna. He's pretty famous. And he was arguing with another guy that was kind of a doormat, and I can't remember his name.
But did they get
No, they did. No. Marius was a one of a kind. Marius must have been.
Well, like they changed.
Yes. I see what you're asking, Rhett. You're asking, did he have the same colleague all 5 years? No, he did not. Sorry, took me a long time to get around to what you were actually asking. So Sulla, Marius died in his 6th consulship, and Sulla was pretty much top dog, okay? He went east and he covered himself in glory. He was great. But, well, I guess I have just asked you, I've answered half of the first question. Describe Sulla as a leader and as a person. Yeah, Jesse.
Okay. So, kind of use selfish. And,
Can you give me an example?
no, I don't really have an example.
Okay, that's okay.
I have my other questions.
I got you. Okay, go ahead. I'll let just a second. I'll let you in too.
He made himself a dictator, basically.
Okay. Which sounds a little bit selfish, unless you're just doing it out of the good of your heart because you think it's good for the people.
Yeah. Which I don't really know any dictators that did that.
But remember, okay, but Jesse, you got to remember what dictator means to them. It meant emergency situation where special powers were required. Do you know what I mean? It didn't mean, when they said dictator, it doesn't mean what it sounds like when we say it. So you always have to remember that. Okay, yes, he did. Do you have more, Matthew? What? Oh, he took yours. All right, I told you he was a ravingly great general, and his guys also loved him. But if you recall, after he finished his campaign in the East, he came back, and there were people kind of pro-Marius party, even though Marius is dead. They're kind of the anti-Sulla party, we'll call them. They did not much want him to come back. And so they tried to stop him, but they couldn't stop him. And he just came back, and he came back with his army, which is, no, you're not supposed to do that as a general. And he came in, and he just killed everybody who had opposed his return. He just killed them. In fact, there's a famous story where he's meeting with the Senate, and he's had 6,000? There's something else that's 6,000 today. That would be quite a coincidence. Thousands of opponents blocked up in the Circus Maximus in one of the theaters, and he just has them slaughtered. He sends soldiers out to just slaughter them, and they can hear the screams in the Senate. And Sulla says something like, "Pay no attention, just listen to me. I just had some details I had to take care of. Just don't mind that." Like the Wizard of Oz, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Yeah. So it just kept going on. He just kept killing people. And finally, somebody came to him and said, "Sulla, we don't really want to ask you who you're going to spare. We don't want to bother you, but it would be nice to know who you plan to kill." And he said, okay, fair enough. So the next day, he posts a list of names in the forum. We call this a proscription list. Okay, people I'm going to kill, or people that it's fine if you want to kill. I'll even pay you. Just go. If you find them, kill them. All right, it's legal. And then, so 80 some names. The next day, 220 more names. The next day, 220 more names. And it just keeps happening. Every morning, people go to the forum or they send their servants, go see if my name is on the list.
Yeah, they send their servants for sure.
Can you imagine? That's horrifying. That's horrifying. And it got to the point where people, it wasn't just because you were anti-Sulla, it was because you had stuff. And if you die as a traitor to the state, they confiscate all your stuff and they get to keep it. So people, one poor guy, this was in your Dorothy Mills book, quoting from Plutarch, one poor guy said, he came and he saw his name and he said, oh, my Alban farm has informed against me. Like, why am I on the list? Because of my farm. Because somebody wants my farm. And that it became common practice to say, oh, his big mansion informed on him. His, money stash informed on him. His farm informed on him, meaning you ended up on the list simply because you had stuff. It was a bloodbath and it was horrifying. So that kind of answers the second half, I feel like. What kind of person was Sulla as a person? What kind of person, not leader, he was? It was horrifying. Ruthless, indeed. In fact, we might have. I probably mentioned that. On his deathbed, he was already ill. Plutarch tells this story too. He was already ill, and I guess there was a guy in Rome that owed some money, but he wasn't going to owe it when Sulla died. So he was kind of waiting around to see if Sulla was going to live. And Sulla found out about it, and he had the guy brought into his presence in his house and strangled right in front of him. And apparently, though, the excitement or the anger or whatever did something to Sulla, whether he burst a blood vessel or something, and he died not long after. Like he said, he started hemorrhaging, and I know. I mean, it's horrifying, but funny. It's like, serves you right, Sulla.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Really? You were already on the way out. And I think, I don't know if this was in Dorothy Mills or not, too, but he had as his epitaph when he died, like his inscription on his tomb, I'm going to quote it wrong. Let me see if it's in here. If it's not, I'll have to paraphrase it. Okay, just a second. No, it was entertaining. Okay, the death of Sulla, it has to be for that. It's not here. Okay. Okay. It was something to this effect. It's better if I could quote it exactly. I never failed to reward anyone for doing me good or punish anyone for doing me bad. I never failed to reward good or punish bad. Nobody ever got away with anything against me. Never failed to punish. Not a great legacy.
Is his grave still somewhere?
I don't know. I think we only know that because it was written down. Historians wrote it down. That's a really good question. I don't know. Oh, and by the way, this is. Oh no, I didn't. Oh, I brought his picture last week. I brought his picture last time. Okay, so remember what I told you, that when you're number one, there's always people coming up into the ranks. And while he was number one, there were a couple more guys up and coming. One of them was named Crassus. This is Crassus. Crassus seems a little intense to me. I don't know.
Like there's something about that.
Crassus's claim to fame was he was filthy rich. Just rich. In fact, I forgot to tell this story yesterday. You guys are luckier because when I do it the second time, things occur to me. So when Sulla was killing people left and right and stealing their stuff, Crassus went and he bought things cheap. All the confiscated goods, he picked it up for a song and basically flipped it, right? Okay? And then, okay, you like that, but oh, this is awful. Whenever a house caught on fire, oh, I can't believe this. When a house caught on fire, he would go to the owner and offer to buy the property. Or he would buy up the properties next to it because people were afraid the fire might spread. He's like, he'd go to the neighbors, hey, you want to sell your house? Yeah, give me $20, whatever. He'd buy it cheap and then he could sell it again. He was just rolling in money. This was his superpower, all right? Money.
That's pretty good.
Other guy up and coming was Pompey.
Oh, yeah.
Probably the fact that we have a very fast-acting fire department now might put a problem on that. This is Pompey. Pompey was one of Sulla's generals, and I think he looks funny. I shouldn't say that. Can we just admit he's got a really fat face? I don't know. And he doesn't look very intelligent to me, but he must have been really smart because of what but he just looks kind of dense. Anyway, that's terrible that's the legacy he leaves in my mind, Pompey. Let me talk about these two guys for a minute. So Pompey got sent on several missions, even while Sulla was still alive. Mission number 1, Spain. There's a guy in Spain, Sertorius, and he was a Roman officer, and he just went rogue. He just took over like he was going to have his own kingdom in Spain. And the Romans weren't going to let that happen, you know. So they told Pompey, go deal with Sertorius, for crying out loud. So he did. While he was there, Crassus also had a crack at things. You know, you don't want your superpower to be just money. It's not very manly. You know, I want people to think I'm a great general. I'm tough. I want to be tough. So Crassus said, okay, or they said to Crassus, we got an opportunity for you to be tough, Crassus. You guys, this is the next question. Who was Spartacus?
He was a gladiator that led the slaves over gladiators to Persia, and at first he was kind of small, but then more people joined him.
Yes, go ahead. Yes. This was the thing that I thought was the 6,000. If I'm not mistaken, 6,000 crosses. It was a lot of crosses. You're right. It's awful. So Spartacus was a gladiator. He was a slave. You guys know what gladiators do for a living, right? You know, you got like a 50% chance of coming out every single time you go to work. And so he and quite a few others, several hundred other slaves, broke out, went to a nearby, I don't know, like restaurant or kitchen of some sort, and started stealing knives, axes, and stuff. And their ranks just kept swelling because all slaves, household slaves, like, oh, it's a slave rebellion, let's join. And there were a lot of slaves in Italy. You know, they'd been bringing captured people home as slaves to work their farms or be household servants, whatever. Teach their kids if you were Greek. You know, it'd be nice to have a Greek tutor for your kids. And so their ranks swelled, and they just went on a rampage. They're just killing people and stealing stuff. And so they sent Crassus, go deal with Spartacus. Go deal with this. It was hard to deal with. And, you know, it almost would have been impossible to deal with if they had listened to Spartacus. Spartacus, it sounds like he was pretty level-headed, smart guy. And he said, look, here's what we got to do, guys. Let's hightail it north. We get over the Alps and we just disappear. Maybe we go to Germany. Like, it's going to be rough. We're not going to live in high style, but we won't be slaves anymore, and they'll never find us. And so the rest of his band said, no, let's just keep stealing and rampaging in Italy. They could have made it.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
And Crassus had a fight on his hands. But unfortunately, they got themselves backed into a corner in Italy with the sea behind them, and because of being stupid and greedy. Oh, we got them on the run. I don't know what they thought they were going to do. Kill all of the Romans and take over. I don't know what they thought. They didn't think. Spartacus thought, how can we get out of this alive and have a good life?
Spartacus probably just had the-
Yeah, he probably could have, but he stayed with the group that he had formed. And as Jesse informed us, crosses lined the roads. And you guys, this is a good, as we're well into Lent and approaching Easter, like this is a good, dying on a cross was horrible. Dying on a cross was horrible. It took you days. The fact that Jesus died so quickly, amazed the guards, amazed Pilate. They went out ready to break his legs. Why? Because then you can't push yourself up to get a breath anymore. It's the only way, on those nailed through feet, this is the only way you can breathe. But usually you suffocated slowly to death over a manner of days. But they didn't want that to happen because it was Passover, it was Sabbath the next day. And so they killed the thieves, or they broke the thieves' legs. Jesus was already dead. Anyway, but these Spartacus and his guys, days. And every time you walk out of the city or walk back in, it's just people being tortured. I know, awful. Now, you would think Crassus is thrilled now, because Crassus got his moment in the sun. Crassus is the hero of the hour. But, Pompey came back before it was all over. And some people thought it was taking Crassus too long to deal with this. It's like, they're a bunch of slaves, Crassus. They're gladiators with swords. They're professional killers. They're like, yeah, Crassus, get out there. You do it. We're paying good money for this. Get it done. So Pompey came back and they said, hey, Pompey, you want to help? Help Crassus? Yeah. So Pompey swoops in. Unfortunately, it was almost already over. But Pompey swoops in, just like Sulla swooped in and got Jugurtha. Pompey swoops in and gets him. And so Pompey runs around saying things like, well, Crassus fought the battles, but I won the war. Okay, can you see these two guys are not going to get along? Can you see this already happening? Do you see history's repeating itself? Marius versus Sulla, Crassus versus Pompey. Kidding, same thing. But Crassus knew something that maybe Sulla and Marius didn't know. Crassus knew that basically the only reason he was important was his money, and he needed backing. He needed friends. And Pompey was very popular. They called him the Great, Pompeius Magnus. Not very many people get to be the Great. Sulla nicknamed him this, by the way. Saw great things in him. So Crassus realized they needed to work together if Crassus wanted any foothold in the government. So I got to play nice with Pompey, and he does. Pompey comes back. Spartacus is taken care of. Next up, pirates. Pirates all through the Mediterranean. Peg legs, patches, don't know about that. Thieves and murderers, definitely. And this is horrible, not just for people who are going to take a pleasure cruise across the Mediterranean, but Rome is now maybe 1 million people or close to. Rome can't feed itself. Do you know what I mean? any more than the Quad Cities. Like, do all of you have a garden in your backyard that can feed your family? Probably not. And if shipments in semis stop getting delivered to Hy-Vee for some reason, we're in trouble, right? The same thing here. They got shipments from Egypt, grain shipments. Egypt, that beautiful Nile Valley that floods and it's so fertile, they were feeding Rome. Pirates don't care. Pirates will sink your ship. They just want your stuff, right? And so, what? What, you would if you were a pirate? Well, I hope piracy isn't the career path you are choosing. The Dread Pirate Roberts, the Dread Pirate Matthias. So they said, Pompey, we need you to do something about this now. But listen to what they said. They is the Senate, okay? Listen to what the Senate said to Pompey. Pompey, you got to get rid of the pirates. So here's what we're going to do for you. We're going to give you absolute power on the sea. And because, pirates aren't stupid, they land and run away, you know what I mean, if they're being chased. We will give you, at 100 miles inland, I think it was 100 miles, all around the Mediterranean, full power. Like you're the dictator, king, whatever, they didn't call it that. They just said, we grant him full powers on the sea and this far inland to deal with the pirates. They gave him a fleet. He had everything in his hands. And you know what? He went out and he cleaned up the pirates in just a few months. Killed a bunch of them, sank others, captured and spared many, and said, oh, you need a new career path, pirate. Why don't you become a farmer? I will give you a farm. And by the way, would you like to tell me where your friends are hiding? Where your little pirate, where Tortuga, where your little pirate cove is, so that I can go deal with them? Because we can bring them in and they can be farmers too. This is true. They have to go into witness protection or something. Yes. Yeah, from here on out, Rome is never going to be without an army. And so he came back, and of course, people think he's fabulous, but we're a little bit afraid because he has all power, and he just came back and landed in Italy with his army. And we did this already in Rome. Sulla came and marched on us. And you know what happened after that? Lists of dead people. Well, they weren't dead yet, but they were going to be fast, posted. Is Pompey going to do that? What is Pompey going to do? And he landed, this is a good one to read straight out of Dorotheus. Hang on, I'm skipping around. Okay. Rumors of every kind about Pompey were scattered abroad and were carried to Rome before him, so that there was a great tumult and stir, as if he designed forthwith to march with his army into the city and establish himself securely as ruler. Crassus withdrew himself, together with his children and property, out of the city. Pompey, therefore, as soon as he entered Italy, called a general muster of the army, and having made a suitable address, and exchanging a kind farewell with his soldiers, he commanded them to depart, every man to his country and place of habitation, only taking care that they should not fail to meet again at his triumph. He disbanded his army immediately as soon as he hit Italy. Thus, the army being disbanded and the news commonly reported, a wonderful result ensued. For when the cities saw Pompey the Great passing through the country unarmed, and with a small train of familiar friends only, as if he was returning from a journey of pleasure, and not from his conquests. They came pouring out to display their affection for him, attending and conducting him to Rome with far greater forces than he disbanded, insomuch that if he had designed any movement or innovation in the state, he might have done it without an army. He put his army, disbanded his army, and the people loved him so much, so many throngs came out to march with Rome to him. They could have taken over Rome just with his supporters, but he didn't. Now, after the pirates, I left this out, they'd sent him to the east, to the Parthians too, all right? So, and this was when he was coming home. And that was my, my misleading question after I looked at this again. I said, in what area of the empire did Pompey have most of his campaigns? I was fishing for the east because that was big, but that's not really a fair question because it was Spain, it was the Mediterranean, it was the east. If you put any of those things, you're right. Now, that same question I asked you, what was happening in Rome while he was gone? There was some stir in Rome while Pompey was in the east. Did anybody catch that, or do you remember? Oh, which is true. Okay, so now this is kind of a storytelling day. I feel like I'm just telling a very long story, but it's fun. Okay, so meanwhile, back in Rome, while Pompey is fighting the Parthians, there was a guy named Catiline. And Catiline was a senator. And for whatever reason, he got it in his head that he was going to get a little band of conspirators and overthrow the government. They were going to station people, like 14 conspirators in different places of Rome, and at a signal they were going to torch everything and then kill the senators as they ran out, and they were going to take over the government. Well, the guy who was consul at the time was a guy named Cicero. Cicero may be the greatest writer and speaker who ever lived. Maybe. Certainly in the Latin language. He was brilliant and smart. And he had made his living as a lawyer, defending really tough cases sometimes, against odds, sometimes against Sulla. And when no one else would touch it with a 10-foot pole because they were afraid of Sulla, and Cicero would take it on. So he ended up as consul, and he found out about this. Some letters came into his possession. There were some conspirators stationed in Italy on the outside. There were some in Rome. And famously, the Senate met, and Catiline was there. And he just lit into Catiline. He had no hard proof of Catiline's involvement, though, right? So all he had was suspicions. And so he gave this speech, something like, "We know, Catiline, we know what you're up to. You're disgusting. You take your dirty, rotten scoundrels and you get out of Rome. We can't stand having you here." And really dressed him down. He left Rome because he knew, okay, I think they know I'm up to something, but I'm going to leave my agents in Rome, right? These agents aren't as smart, apparently, as Catiline. Because some visitors came to Rome, some visitors from Gaul. And the conspirators said, hey, we'll have a little talk. We heard you met with the Senate, and they didn't really give you what you wanted. Yeah, that's a problem with the Senate. They're kind of jerks. But we have a little plan. I'm going to mix it up a little bit. And would you like to know a little bit about our plan? You want to be a part of it? And they said, well, we have to talk to our leaders back home, but it would help if you gave us letters. What exactly do you have in mind? So they said, oh, yeah. So they write out the entire conspiracy. And they give it to the ambassadors. And the ambassadors go straight to Cicero. Here's your proof. Cicero arrested the conspirators. Catiline's already beat it, right? And they're obviously guilty. And they're having a Senate meeting. Well, what do we do with them? What do we do with them? Kill them. Just kill them. They're traitors. Kill them. The only problem with that was that's not really legal in the Roman system. You have to be allowed to appeal to the people. You have to have a trial. Just like us, you couldn't just grab somebody, say you're guilty, and take them out and kill them. There's a process. And one guy was in the Senate, young guy, early in his career. And he stood up and he said, I don't think we should kill them. I think we need to take a longer view. How are people going to look at us in the future if we just unconstitutionally, illegally kill these guys? Let them go through the due process of law. Maybe we just keep them incarcerated for a while. And another speaker got up. This speaker's name was Cato. I'll tell you the young speaker's name in a minute. He said, oh, you're one of them, aren't you? We know, you young guys, you're in on the conspiracy, aren't you? I say we just kill him. And they listened to that older man, Cato, and they killed him. That young man who spoke against killing them was Julius Caesar. He was young Julius Caesar. And he always had this cloud of suspicion over him. Were you in with Catiline? Is that why you wanted to spare them? But we have no proof. But there was always this, no, I think he was mixed up in that somehow. It's possible. I don't know that he would have a lot to gain from it, though. He was already in the Senate. He was already an up and coming. He was the next guy coming up, right?
I'm glad he didn't decide that he was one of them to kill them. Well, actually, am I glad?
This does set well with Julius Caesar later because this is a digression in our main story, but it's an interesting one. Cicero wrote a whole just tons and tons and tons about this conspiracy, and another historian named Sallust wrote a history of the whole thing. And but it turns out that it was good that Julius Caesar didn't recommend just breaking the law because Cicero later got in real trouble for it. He made some enemies. He made some political enemies. And they came for him and they said, aren't you the guy who illegally executed those guys? And Cicero actually went into exile for about 18 months. He went to Greece and lived there because he was in danger of being executed himself for illegal activities. Cicero, and I'll end the story of Cicero with this. Brilliant man, great writer, great speaker, but for the rest of his life, he never let people forget he stopped Catiline. You ever know someone who did something and then they just want to remind you all the time that they did some awesome thing? Remember that time when I did what? This was Cicero. Remember that time when I saved Rome? Yes, Cicero. We all remember because you never stop talking about it. We have tons of letters he wrote. He had a best friend who lived in Greece, and he had a brother. Books and books full of Cicero's letters. And even his best friend said, Cicero, you need to stow it. You're getting a little tiresome. He didn't listen. Anyway, we'll pick back up with Cicero's story later, okay? This is what was happening while Pompey was gone. So Rome had been this close to senators being massacred and vast parts of the city being burned down. All right. So when Pompey came back, and they knew he wasn't going to try to take over, there's not going to be any lists of people to die. Crassus comes back. Pompey and Crassus shake hands. All is well. Then people are so relieved, and they love Pompey. Does that make sense? Okay, because they're so relieved that he's going to be a good guy. All right, but this young Julius Caesar, he's got brains. He's got skills. Crassus, the rich guy, Pompey, the great, darling of the people, think it would be really, really nice to bring in a third guy to help them run the show. So they start meeting with each other and saying, can you guys picture that if two people work together, there's always a problem that they might fight? But when you have three people, it balances, like the tripod here. You take one leg away and it's not very sturdy. But when you have the three, that two are keeping an eye on the other one all the time, and it balances it. So Pompey and Crassus And Julius Caesar said, we got the power, we got the skills, and we could run this thing if we're smart. We call this group of 3 men the first triumvirate. Triumvirate. Tri means 3, you know that, triangle, tripod. And vir means man in Latin. So triumvirate just means 3 men. That's all it means, 3 guys. And these were the 3. So what's the plan? You know, how many of them can be consul at the same time? 2. So there's always one out, right? So they start cutting deals. Okay, you guys make me consul and then I'll award this to you. So the first deal was this. Pompey came home and he had made all sorts of peace treaties, you know, and land grants to his soldiers. And he thought, everybody loves me. I'll just go home and the Senate will say, good job, Pompey. We agree to everything. And they didn't. They said, well, I don't know about these treaties and these land grants. We're going to have to think about it. Julius Caesar said, you know what? You help me get elected consul. I'll push through everything you want. Deal? Pompey says, deal. So a little bit of paying off of people. A lot of, Dorothy Mills tells us, a lot of having public games and food paid for by Julius Caesar. Probably with money borrowed from Crassus, I'm guessing. I don't know this, but I've always had my suspicion. And the people love, oh, Julius Caesar, he's the one, he has great parties. Great public parties, the food, excellent. Let's vote for him, okay. And then he does, he pushes all of Pompey's legislation through. But you know, technically, they're not supposed to be consul every year. So they keep switching it up and inviting sort of puppet consuls in with them, you know, like just bodies to sit there and be the second consul, but not really in power. And so they do this for a number of years. So at one point, they arrange for Crassus to go fight the Parthians. Because poor Crassus, all he had was the Spartacus thing. And Pompey came and ripped part of that. Like, I want a war. I don't just want to be the rich guy. I want a war too. Like, okay, go to Parthia, Crassus. In the meantime, Pompey marries Julius Caesar's daughter, Julia. Thinking, you know, okay, what? You'd be what?
I'd be okay.
Yeah.
If I had a sister, I would.
Yeah, and you know, it was like they were going to be one big happy family. And supposedly, neither of them will turn on the other if they're father-in-law and son-in-law. Yeah, okay, so that's an unpleasant fact of Roman life. Often older men married much younger women, like 18 and 60 or something like that. We don't think that's normal. That was normal for them, okay? So try not to worry too much about, oh, and he married so-and-so's daughters. Like, what the heck, isn't he 50? Yeah, probably. It's okay, they were all good with it. Actually, we don't know how Julia felt about it at all, I guess, but nobody asked her. Okay, so back in the West, Pompey and Caesar are good. They're relatives now. Crassus, go do your thing. Have your battles. Well, Crassus, all right, I already told you what his superpower was, and it's not very super. He just can't stand to keep his hands off money. And so he shows up in the East, and instead of like a good general would, you know, planning his attack and positioning his armies, he starts going to temples and writing down inventories of all the loot in the temple. So he can sack the temple and he's assessing all the jewels and money, gold. So this is a bad start. The Parthians were always pretty nasty opponents. That's why see Parthia, it never gets to be inside the yellow. Parthia is always fighting Rome. They never finally conquer it. And so Crassus really wasn't prepared for what he got into, probably. He wasn't completely incompetent, but he wasn't great, all right? He wasn't Pompey and he wasn't Julius Caesar. And then it didn't help when the Parthians killed his son and chopped off his head and put it on a pole and brought it up to the camp and said, does anybody recognize him? Does he have family here? Because I don't think he could be Crassus's son because this guy was actually brave, unlike Crassus. So Crassus goes into a little bit of a funk, a depression, and he just kind of for a few days, he just broods on this, which you can't do in the middle of a war. You know, you can't, time is of the essence. So they lost miserably. Crassus died. Before I tell you more about, did you have something you wanted to say? I thought I saw a hand. Okay. Crassus died in Parthia. One of two ways, take your pick, maybe both, don't know. Story number one, they killed Crassus and said, oh, we heard you really like money. Have some money. And they poured molten gold down his throat. Before or after death, not sure, honestly. Story number two, if you like another story, this one's my personal favorite, but okay. So to understand and appreciate this story, and some of you who did my Greece and Rome class last year may remember this. There's a Greek play called the Bacchae. It's about worshipers of Dionysus, and they go crazy and involves somebody's head being ripped off. All right, and the mom rips her kid's head off, but she doesn't know. She's in a frenzy. She's in the Bacchic frenzy, and she thinks it's a lion. Anyway, so she brings the head in and is like, oh, look what I got, and it's like, oh, you're not going to be happy when you come out of your frenzy. Anyway, and so in this play, you need a head as a prop, right? Not a real head, but you see, when they come to Mithridates, the king of Parthia, and they say, we have killed Crassus, here's his head, like perfect. Because you know, right now we are staging a production of the Bacchae, and we need a head. And the story is that they used his head as a prop in the play. You like the gold better? I like the prop in the play. I don't know what that says about me, but I like that one. All right, so Crassus is gone. And one leg of the tripod has just disappeared. Also, Julia died. Julius Caesar and Pompey aren't related anymore. I don't know. She got sick. It might have been childbirth, but I think she just got sick. People, so many things that we can easily cure now, people died from up until 150, 100 years ago, infection and things like that. Okay, so here's where it stood. Every year before Crassus went east and died, they settled who was going to have what sphere. And Julius Caesar got sent to Gaul. I think I've just answered another, yeah. What general rose to challenge Pompey's authority? Julius Caesar. Where did this general spend years? Gaul, sorry. I just blew out the questions again. They sent him to Gaul because the guys who lived right around the Alps and just on the other side, they were kind of Romanized already. The rest of these guys were just barbarian hordes as far as the Romans were concerned. They were Celtic people, just like the people in Britain, and with druids and the whole thing. And Julius Caesar said, this is a great place to show my stuff, what I got. So they had organized that he would have a 5-year stint in Gaul to start with. But every winter, you don't have war in the winter generally because it's icy and cold and snowy and not convenient. And so armies would just withdraw. Just sort of, we understand we're not going to fight over the winter. And, the Latin word, this is a fun fact, the Latin word for the army winter quarters is hiberna. Hibernate. What do you do if you hibernate? You go into winter quarters, right? So while the Roman army hibernated, so to speak, every winter Julius Caesar would come down and cross the Alps, and Crassus and Pompey would come north, and they'd have a little meeting, a little secret meeting. And everybody who was in on their plans would come, and they would just basically plan what to do for the next year. Okay, you and you are going to be consuls. You're going to go here. You're going to do, and they just ran everything. All right. So 5 years had passed, and Julius Caesar was going gangbusters. He really is the one who made these borders of Gaul. He stretched it that far. He went to Britain. He said, these Gauls are getting supplies and help from somewhere, and I think it's that little island over there. I'm gonna go check it out. So he went and checked it out. Yeah, they had no idea, how big it was or anything. It was kind of rumored. There's one historian that talks about it like it might be a figment of the imagination before Julius Caesar. Like, they say there's an island up there. Maybe, maybe not. So he went over. He didn't really accomplish much of anything except kind of scare a few of the Britons. The Britons knew that he had ships, Julius Caesar had ships coming up the Thames River to where London is now. And they went out and they put stakes. They sharpened stakes to a point, and they embedded them in the bed of the River Thames. And the point was just below the surface, so you couldn't see it. And then the ship would come in, and it would just rip a hole right in the bottom of the ship and sink the ship. It was awesome. No, because about 400, 500 years after this, groups of people called Angles and Saxons are going to invade. They're German people, and they're going to invade, and it's their language that became English. I don't know if we know much about the Celtic. We do because the people today that live in this area of Britain, it's called Wales, and Irish are sort of the holdouts of whatever, like it's the 2,000 years later descendant of whatever language that was. But the reason we call it English is because those Angles, Anglish is what they spoke. That's a really good question. So he got holes ripped in his ships, and then his poor guys, are trying to get to shore, and the Britons are just there, and they kill him on the shore, and Julius Caesar says, okay, we're just going to go back to Gaul. This isn't working out. It's going to be another 80 years before the Romans actually take over Britain. But so he did his 5 years, and then he said to Pompey, Crassus was still alive at this point, why don't you give me another 5? Because I got him on the run. This is great. This sphere of military activity is just to my liking. I'm pushing the Germans back over the Rhine and holding the Rhine border, and it's going to be great. I'm Romanizing them. I'm setting up Roman towns. And the Gauls are coming up and say, oh, maybe I would like to be Roman. Romans have hot baths. Romans have good food. Romans don't live in huts, paint themselves blue, and things like this. So he was Romanizing Gaul. But then Crassus died, and Julia died. And then Julius Caesar's second 5-year stint was up. By the way, if you have an interest ever, Julius Caesar wrote the story of all of his years in Gaul. It's called On the Gallic War by Julius Caesar himself. He was a fine writer.
During the summer, we should have the
If you guys ever have a book, you know what, I would, okay, I'm just putting myself there. I would get together with you over the summer, even if you wanted to read. I would read a book with you. I don't have to tell you what to say about it, but anyway, we'll talk. That would be fun. I've always wanted to do that. I used to do that. I used to have a book club that met every month. Okay. Julius Caesar has done all he can do in Gaul. All right? He's really done all he can do there. And he's ready to come home. But Pompey isn't ready for him to come home. Has an army. It's not there in Rome, but he's got access to a lot of soldiers. He even famously once said, oh, I don't need an army. All I have to do is stamp my foot and an army will appear. He's kind of full of himself at that point, I guess. And he even asked Julius Caesar for some of his soldiers back. He had lent Caesar a legion, 1,000 guys. And at one point he said, hey, Caesar, I need those soldiers. I'm going to be going to Spain again. He got the soldiers, but he never went to Spain. He just stayed. and waited. So we have the two guys staring each other down. Julius Caesar's in Gaul and he has an army and they love him. They'll do anything for him. Pompey also has loyal supporters. What's going to happen? Well, here's Julius Caesar. He's sitting up in Gaul and he's thinking, okay, there are people who don't like me in Rome. If I come back, I lay aside my army, I'm not a general, I've got no office whatsoever. They will possibly find some charge against me. Whether it's true or not, it doesn't matter. And they'll nab me. Maybe they'll try me. Maybe they'll execute me. Maybe they'll imprison me. But if I go to Rome with my army, that's illegal. If I don't lay down my power, what should I do? Pompey is sitting in Rome thinking, if he doesn't lay down his army, it's civil war. The Senate said, well, Pompey, what if both of you lay down your armies? That is a better idea, but Pompey said, nix on that. Won't be laying down my army. So the famous story is that Julius Caesar was thinking about this. What do we do? What do we do? My entire future career depends on this move. Like the highest stakes chess game ever. What will I move? Well, there's a river in northern Italy called the Rubicon River. And it was the edge of Gaul, basically. On the north side, it's Gaul. It's where Julius Caesar has command. Legally, he has authority there. South of the Rubicon is Italy. It is where he is not supposed to go with his army, or he is in rebellion. He's done something illegal, like Sulla. And they say he stood there and he wondered, had dinner with some friends, sent some small, not troops ahead, but just like advisors, cabinet member staff, to a town south of the Rubicon. Okay. But he's still on the north side with his army and he's thinking about it. And he's standing there. Do I do it? What do I do? And the legend is that an apparition appeared. A huge ghostly entity, a man, with a trumpet, blew a blast on the trumpet and stepped across the Rubicon. And Julius Caesar took this for a sign. The gods want me to cross. So he said, I'm going to do it. Alia jacta est. The die is cast. I've rolled the dice. When you roll the dice, can you take it back? Once it leaves your hands, it's done, right? Unless you're my kids and they say, well, it hit your foot, it hit your cup. I want to re-roll. No. How many times I had that argument? No, you can't roll the dice again. Yeah, no. Can I put them in the cup again? No. Okay, also, the die is cast sounds a little bit like I'm taking a gamble. Because then as now, maybe more then, because we have a lot of games that involve dice that aren't gambling games. But back then, if you're rolling dice, it's probably like Vegas. You know, I don't know any games. I don't even know what you call the game where, in movies, they roll the dice down the long thing. This is how sheltered I am. I don't even know what that's called. Anyway, so he took a gamble, and after he crossed, it was done. There was no take back, no do-over. And when Rome found out, they went wild. Julius Caesar is marching on Rome with an army. We know what happens when generals march on Rome with their armies. Not good. Now, okay, so I am going to proceed to ruin part of next week's reading, all right? But it's okay. All right, but I need to tell you a little bit about the play because we're going to start reading Julius Caesar. Okay, you know what? Okay, I'll do my best not to ruin. All right, I'll do my best not to ruin. Let me see. Okay, let me see where it was at the end where you read, and I'll see if I can contain myself. You're asking a lot, Matthias. Okay, I may have already, no. You know what? It was the crossing of the Rubicon. It was the crossing of the Rubicon where you ended. Okay, so we are reading all of chapter 13 next week. Okay, so I will try to, except there something is going to come out today that hopefully you all already know, but I'm sorry, it's coming out. And you're going to find it's, I have to let you know. Okay, so I will let you find out what happened. But let me just say this. Pompey was in control of Rome. This is the guy who said, if I stamp my foot, I will have an army. He has a fleet. And when he hears Julius Caesar is marching in Rome, he left. He grabbed everything and his supporters and he skedaddled to Greece. I'll just leave it at that. This is, I'm going to argue, the first in a series of really, really bad decisions made by Pompey. Chapter 13 is going to be full of a lot of bad decisions made by Pompey and a lot of really good decisions made by Julius Caesar. Okay? He was on a roll. He was on a roll. Okay, now I'm going to read you two poems, one of which is very silly. But because I can, because I have you captive and I can. And then I want to talk about the play Julius Caesar, all right, which there will be a spoiler. Yes. Oh, no, I didn't. I'm so glad you asked because I've had students just sort of not mention the paper, just in the hopes that maybe it wouldn't happen. It has to do with the play, and so I'll talk about it when we talk about the play in a minute. Thank you for reminding me. Okay, just a second. I need to drink. I don't realize how much I'm talking, and then suddenly I stop talking, and I think I've been talking for 45 minutes without taking a breath. Okay, here we go. So glad I have you guys so I can read these. All my kids are gone. Crossing the Rubicon River. This is poem number 1. Caesar had great power, but still he wanted more. And if he crossed the Rubicon, he knew there would be war. Stay in Gaul, the Senate said. Do not come back to Rome. Keep your army up in Gaul. Don't think of coming home. Caesar thought for several days, then made his move at last. He marched his army right across and said, the die is cast. I like that one. Okay, it makes up for the segments. It's Spartacus. But I won't have another. I won't get to read this again for 2 years, so I'm reading it. There once was a man named Spartacus who stirred up an enormous fuss. Oh yes, he did. A gladiator, brave and bold, he wouldn't do as he was told. Oh no, he wouldn't. He led the slaves in a revolt. It gave the Romans quite a jolt. Oh yes, it did. And though he died so long ago, his story lives for those who know that freedom is a wondrous thing. A magic bird as it takes wing, hard to catch and hard to hold, to be valued more than gold, guaranteed to all of us by those who dare like Spartacus. Oh, yes. The ending kind of makes up for the beginning. Okay. We are going to read a Shakespeare play for the next 2 weeks. Now, have any of you ever read a Shakespeare play before? Macbeth. Okay, so some of you did Macbeth with me. So those of you, so some of you not. So I'm gonna proceed as if you haven't, or if you don't remember. Okay, and give everybody the details. Okay. Well, first of all, do not be afraid, because sometimes you go, "Oh, Shakespeare." I sat down a couple months ago in my little library at home, just like I did for Macbeth, and I read this entire play for you. I recorded myself. And I have sent, your parents already got the email this morning. There's a link to a Julius Caesar playlist, okay? You just click Julius Caesar and it goes, and I have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4, Act 5. I don't think YouTube put them in order. I'm sure I can reorder them somehow, but I don't know how. I'm always afraid of deleting things, so I just leave it. So before you just click on the top one, make sure it says Act 1, or you'll end up starting in the middle of the play. All I want you to do this week, you're going to read chapter 13 in Dorothy Mills. We're going to read Acts 1, 2, and 3. All you have to do is get your book, turn on your computer, hit play, and follow along. And I'm reading the whole thing to you and stopping and explaining what's going on. All right? So it's all you got to do is sit there with me. And each video is about 40 minutes, I think. So it's about, and we're only doing 3 of them this week. What? Well, okay, no, because I want to, okay, hold on to that question. Yes. It's Legenda Tutorials, I think, because that's my tutorial service that I run. That's its name, I think. I should know things like this. It's all live on there right now, but what is it called? Okay, so Jesse asked if it was in Old English. No, Old English technically is not readable by us anymore unless you had special training. So those of you who read Beowulf with me last year, I might have given you a little snippet in Old English. This was called Anglo-Saxon. Middle English is readable by us, but it's hard. Shakespeare is modern English.
It was Latin, right?
It was what?
It was originally written in Latin.
No, it was written in English. These are the words that Mr. Shakespeare wrote down on the page that you're about to read. But so if you're familiar with the King James Version of the Bible, King James lived around the time of Shakespeare. They're roughly contemporaries, all right? So it's that sort of language. But language changes. He uses words in ways we don't use them anymore, and he uses words we don't use very often. So let me take you a walk. It doesn't matter if your book, I put this one on the list to buy because it's cheap. It really doesn't matter what edition of Julius Caesar you have. Julius Caesar by Shakespeare is Julius Caesar by Shakespeare. All of them are going to be the same, okay? But let me take you a little walk through the book and talk about what's available to you. First of all, Shakespeare plays are divided into 5 acts. And each act has several scenes, all right? And some scenes are very, very short. Some scenes go on for a couple of pages. But at the beginning of each one, it tells you where you are. So when you open it up, it says Act 1, Scene 1, Rome, a street. Got it. I'm on a street in Rome. And then it says enter Flavius, Marullus, and certain commoners. They tell you who's in the scene and everything right at the beginning. If I go to scene 2, a public place. And then it says flourish. Flourish means a horn, a trumpet blast. Enter Caesar, Antony, and it gives you a list of people. Now, you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to remember all these people? Well, maybe you won't, but it doesn't matter because at the very front, there's a list of all the people in the play and who they are. Dramatis personae, the people of the drama. And it lists all of them and it tells you he's a poet, he's a soothsayer, they are servants of Brutus, wife to Caesar. If you're reading and you can't suddenly remember who this person is, just go to the front and it will tell you. I've recorded it, so just hit pause. You don't have to miss what I'm reading. You know, if you're looking at something and you miss what I said, just go back 30 seconds. So it's easy, easy. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out is in this Dover edition, and many of them, there are footnotes. So let me look at the first one. I don't even know what it is. Okay. This guy, a centurion comes, and he calls a guy mechanical. He says, you're mechanical. It's like, and you'd think, was he a robot? No, but I looked down at number 1, mechanical, of the class of mechanic or artisan. It means he's a worker, he's an artisan. He's like a tailor or a cobbler or something like that. Does that make sense? So when you run into a word, I did not explain every single word in the footnotes on the video because that would just be really tiresome. Also, it would lose the flow of what they're saying. And I thought, okay, if you want to know this particular one, you can pause me and check it out. Some of them I point out because they're important to the plot, all right? And so we're reading Acts 1, 2, and 3. So whenever you're ready to do it, grab your book, turn on the YouTube channel, hit act 1 or whatever act you're on that day and just read along with me. And I will stop and I will look at the camera and I will say, you see what's going on here. This is what he means by that. All right. And it shouldn't be too confusing. And I think, did that help with Macbeth last year? Did that make Macbeth a lot? Okay. I think this will be pretty straightforward. But that's why we're here. I'm not going to tell you on the video what to think of it or how to interpret it. I'm just going to try to tell you, I think, if memory serves, I just tell you what's happening so you can read it. And then when we come together, we will talk about, well, why do you think he did this? And what did it mean when he did that? Okay, and we'll talk about it a little deeper. But at least you'll come and you'll know the basic plot. Now, here's the spoiler and also the answer to Owen's question about paper. We are going to have one more of these essays, should something have happened. Now, if you guys want to do the extra classes, the other two, I was going to have you do a creative writing thing based on the Eagle of the Ninth. So, well, I'll talk to your parents. At the very least, if you could watch the videos and you could email me your stuff, if you want to do it, okay? That's between you and your parents. But this paper we will have time to do. And the paper topic is the spoiler. Hopefully you all know this already. You can write this down on a blank piece of paper in your book if you want. Should, I hate to do it in case you don't know. Should Brutus have killed Julius Caesar? Sorry. I hope you knew. Should Brutus have killed Julius Caesar? So your job this week is, you're going to have a yes and a no. You know how this works now. And as you read the first 3 acts, if something occurs to you as a good reason, write it down and bring it with you. And then together we will expand those lists over the next couple of weeks. Yeah, you're just making lists. You're not writing this paper because we won't even finish the play this week. Yeah, you're just making the list. You're looking. So, and as you read Julius Caesar with me online, just if something occurs to you, oh my gosh, that's a good reason for him to do it, just jot it down. Or, oh my goodness, I can't believe he would kill Caesar after that. The murder is going to happen in the play this week. I think it's in Act 3, okay? So no, we're collecting. We can't really write a paper like that until we've collected all our information. But I'm going to give you a freebie, all right? Something that you could put on your paper now if you wanted. And because I don't know if Dorothy Mills talks about it, and the play doesn't talk about it. When Pompey ran away from Caesar, and I won't tell you how it ended because Matthias doesn't want, there are too many spoilers here. Brutus was one of the people who went with him. Brutus was on Pompey's side. So was another guy you're going to meet in the very first act named Cassius. Cassius was pro-Pompey. Brutus was pro-Pompey. And when when everything happened that happened, Julius Caesar had the habit of forgiving everyone who had been on the other side, including Brutus. And in fact, not only forgave him and didn't punish him at all for fighting in Pompey's army, but gave him a job, gave him government posts, as he did Cassius. All right, keep that in mind. That's what we're going to talk about for the next couple of weeks. Also, I need to remind you of one more thing. We have met someone named Brutus before this semester.
Yes, Brutus, he was the,
I told you at the time, I said, remember that name. We're going to meet it again. What did Brutus do? Brutus number 1. The old Brutus. Does anybody remember?
I do remember it.
I know, I believe you. And when I start saying it, happens to me a million times a day, Jesse. When the last king of Rome had a son who was dirty, rotten scoundrel who raped Lucretia, who killed herself in front of her husband and her husband's friends, one of whom was named Brutus, and said, what are you going to do about it? Brutus led the forces that drove the last king out of Rome. And Brutus was one of the first 2 consuls ever created in the New Republic. Okay? All right. So here's what you got to remember. Brutus's family is known for getting rid of the tyrants. Don't ever forget, Brutus's family, because this Brutus is the same family. Brutus's family is known for driving out kings, driving out tyrants, and bringing freedom to Rome. Remember, okay? All right, so recap. We're reading Dorothy Mills. And basically, the stuff that's happening in the play, you're going to be reading, and the stuff leading up to the play, you're going to be reading, which is why I put them together this week. We're going to read Acts 1 through 3 of Julius Caesar. And as you read, or as you read Dorothy Mills, frankly, if you see any good reason for Brutus to kill Julius Caesar or any good reason for him not to, jot it down. And we will start, as we discuss the play together, we will keep adding to that list, okay? And by the time we write the paper, we're going to have tons of stuff on our list. All right, any questions? Okay, awesome. It's 10:07. I've been told you're not to leave the room till 10 after. Will something explode? Are there mines in the hallway? I don't know. I'm going to turn this off.